Hi, KSee here. Today I'm going to talk about the protagonist of Attack on Titan, Eren, and more specifically his notorious anger. Among the YouTube critics I enjoy watching, he tends to get a lot of flack as a bad character for several different and understandable reasons, but most commonly because anger is his dominant personality trait. However, even though I get where everyone's coming from, I'm making this video to explain why I think Eren is a well-written protagonist, not just despite his anger, but because of it. First, my bit on angry characters in general. To be angry is to have an emotion, but not necessarily a quality. Part of what gives a well-written, quote-unquote, angry character so much anger is not that they are simply angry people, it's the underlying personality traits that create that extreme anger. It's a matter of whether or not the author has written in these traits and can show them instead of telling them. In Eren's case, the author has. Eren's not angry just for the sake of being angry, or because he's a teenage boy with angst, or even just because of his emotional trauma. Eren becomes the protagonist we have by episode 3, yes, because of his hot-headed nature, but ultimately because he is passionate, impulsive, idealistic, and has an unshakable sense of justice. First, his emotional nature. Eren embodies the phrase, follow your heart. He makes some pretty bad decisions, yet we see that he's capable of logical reasoning in the canon scene and the court scene. He thinks about a situation and still screws up. In the court scene, he thinks to himself, paraphrasing here, I should really shut up now for my own sake, but he's so emotionally charged that he speaks out anyway, even though he knows it's against his better judgment. That brings us to the conclusion that he's not stupid, he's impulsive. He makes every decision based on his emotions and lets them sweep away any reasonable misgivings he might have. At this point, someone might say, yeah, KSee, duh, that's why he's angry. But anger isn't the only emotion he's so controlled by. We see him moved ultimately by his ideals and sense of justice, not his anger, though he tries to push through everything through angry reactions, so that's what we see outwardly. For example, we see early on that Eren is a very loyal friend who tries to beat up anyone who bullies Armin. He could just shoot them away or try to use scare tactics, which might have been more successful since the bullies would never have known he couldn't actually beat them up alone. But based on the flashback, it seems like he really goes out of his way to fight them to exact justice. A more prominent example is that, while every major character in this show fights Titans for different reasons, Eren fights Titans because of his personal grudge, which is certainly closely related to his anger. This grudge, however, comes out of his sense of justice. When he can observe something bad happening to the individual people in his life, he believes the perpetrators deserve to pay for it. The anime did not spend enough time letting us get to know the characters before plunging them into the main plot, so it seems to be an oft-forgotten fact in discussion of Eren's character that, originally, his goal was rather innocent. He didn't want to kill all the Titans, he wanted to see the outside world. At first, he wants to join the Survey Corps for that purpose, and after witnessing the wounded his heart and soldiers coming home, to ensure the suffering and death his predecessors went through wasn't in vain. In other words, because of his sense of justice and his desire to take justice into his own hands. Then, when he sees for himself the evil the Titans bring upon the people he cares about as they invade his hometown, that's when his idealistic view of the world is corrupted, and joining the Survey Corps becomes about exacting revenge, or what he believes is justice, not a naive curiosity. His sense of justice, in that Titans are evil and therefore should be vanquished, is quite simple at first, but is a big part of the reason he shows so much anger when his sense of justice is disappointed. However, his genuine belief that he will stand a chance or even be able to kill all the Titans, especially before he discovers his power, betrays an equally powerful sense of idealism. Perhaps all of his ideals are not dead yet. He really believes he can become strong enough to save the people he cares about, unlike Hannes and that younger version of himself who had to watch his mother be eaten by a Titan because he was too weak. He has extremely high standards for himself, and that is why he's so distressed at certain points in the series by his own weakness. We also see his extremely idealistic standards for others throughout the show. In the cafeteria before the Trost arc, we see Eren giving a speech to his comrades in the cafeteria about the virtues of joining the Survey Corps, even though it probably means gory death. And he honestly expects someone to side with him and agree with his noble ideals, even though he's seen Titans and the fear they strike into people's hearts firsthand. He's seen the power of denial back in Shingeki, and he's been frustrated at it for years. He has no reason to believe anyone there would be different, especially considering the way the system is set up so that the best soldiers never see a Titan, but he has faith anyway. He's even got tears in the corners of his eyes from the passion, and he storms out when no one agrees. He's angry because his ideals have been disappointed. Realizing his ideals is very important to him on an emotional level, because relating back to how controlled he is by his emotions, he has so many personal passions about love, loss, and justice wrapped up in his quest to kill Titans. Now let's look at his mantra. If you live, you win. If you lose, you die. If you don't fight, you can't win. It is rather simplistic and rather cutthroat. Perhaps because he is so controlled by whatever he feels at a given moment, he has a very simple way of looking at the world so that he can abide by his mantra in it. He believes that you can fight against anything, and have at least a chance to win. That belief in itself is more idealistic than what many of the other characters, such as Jean, would believe, and Eren is disappointed in that cafeteria scene because he doesn't realize before that the majority of them think it's useless to even try. However, as Attack on Titan is not finished as of the time of making this video, we don't see Eren's complete character arc. Still, he is forced to think more critically about his belief system as the story goes on, particularly when it is revealed that Annie is a female Titan. Now, they could have handled her character a bit better, since she's not a character we really care about at that point, despite the fact that Eren really seems to care a lot, but from what I understand, there was more on Eren and Annie's relationship in the manga that probably should not have been cut out. But I haven't read the entire thing, so I can't say anything definitively. But we can see that Eren greatly values the people in his life, and despite all his friends dying at her hand, he doesn't want to believe at first it's one of his friends that killed all his other friends. He falters because she hasn't lived up to his ideals of what a friend should be, fiercely loyal like he is, and he's disappointed. Just as he runs out of the room after failing to convince everyone to join the Survey Corps back in that cafeteria, he tries to avoid his newfound responsibility to fight her. What finally gets him moving is his sense of justice, manifested as anger. He's angry now that she has done something so wrong, and weighs the lives of everyone else he cared about against hers, deciding he will fight her. While he's in a bit of a bloodthirsty frenzy during his fight with Annie, afterwards they imply it in the very last scenes that he's beginning to question his motto about winning and losing. He describes the feeling of his humanity slipping away, and starts to realize that though you can't win if you don't fight, the victory of living might not be worth it if he's no longer human. So, I don't agree with the apparent consensus that Eren is too simple and too angry to be a well-written protagonist. He has enough underlying personality traits that are implied but not outright stated that make him more complicated than he seems at first. However, I do think there is a more valid reason to complain about his character. His backstory before the wall is broken is not well explained. One of the most prominent displays of his extreme sense of justice is the way he deals with the human traffickers who kidnapped Mikasa and murdered her parents. He kills them with fiery, remorseless passion, and he yells at them about how wrong they were as he does it, completely and foolishly fearless. Instead of calling the MPs, who might simply arrest the men, he decides to take justice into his own hands. While we do see what he's like in this instance, we don't see why. Carla seems to be a very loving parent and acts normally enough, and though Grisha seems very secretive and eccentric from what we've seen of him, it's implied that Carla is the main parental figure in Eren's life, since Grisha is apparently a good enough doctor that people from the inner wall call him all the way in one of the outermost districts. It's unclear how Eren obtained his philosophy as a 9-year-old child, and that's an important aspect of his character. It is possible this is explained in the manga and will be explained in the anime in the future, but if they're going to explain it, it would have been better done sooner. So, in conclusion, the issue with Eren's character is not that his only characteristic is anger, it's that they don't show us how he developed the fundamental traits, his passion, idealism, and sense of justice, that make him so angry. So thanks for watching, I hope you enjoyed. Feel free to leave your opinion in the comments. Bye!